The chief called out to his men, "All right, 240, we're going in. And this is probably the most difficult thing that we've ever done. Be really careful, because one fireman has already been hit by a jumper. You won't need your roll-ups, just your oxygen." And so Fire Engine Company 240, among the many others, rolled in toward the World Trade Center, which had been hit by two planes. One of the men that was there was a man by the name of Tom Dooley. And he heard the speech. He heard the chief say, "Go with God." So he, with the others, began quickly heading toward the World Trade Center. But as they neared the building, somebody yelled out a shout, and sure enough, when they said, "Run!" it was not for no reason, because the first tower of the World Trade Center was coming down. There was debris, there was smoke, there was all kinds of dust that filled the air. And he ran as fast as he could to try to make the building across the street. But as he went, he was enveloped by the dust and the dirt and the debris, and he crawled until he finally made it into that building. But by now his lungs were filled with all kinds of dust and particles, and he could hardly breathe. He could feel himself choking to death, and in fact, he wanted to die. Somehow or another, he got his flashlight, had a range of about a foot, and he looked and found his mask, his face mask, and he cleaned it out and turned on his oxygen. There were 4 or 5 people near him. He only got 3 good breaths, and he realized others as well needed that oxygen, so he shared it around with the ones who were near him. After a bit, he made it out of that place and headed to gather where he could find some of his brothers, firefighting brothers, and where they could help some more. They rolled out a 3-inch fire hose for a ship, a fire ship that was extinguishing flames. And they, after helping in this and that area, they decided to go back in and to see if they could find survivors among the rubble. As they went toward the building, it was just at the time when somebody realized that the second tower was coming down. It too had the same devastating effect upon the area around it. As debris and dust rolled down the street, they ran. He ran as fast as he could. He stepped in some kind of a pothole, and he felt his leg kind of give way, his ankle twisted, and he realized that perhaps even that his ankle was broken, but he did not stop. He did not slow down. He got out of there as quick as he could. Soon, he found some EMTs where they wrapped his ankle. He didn't know the chief that was telling him to go home, but he said he couldn't. And for the second time that day, as he headed back toward the building to find any that might be survived and to help those who were hurting, the chief said to him, "Go with God." That same day, 700 miles to the south and a little bit to the west, there was a man by the name of Greg who lay in a hammock. Next to him was a glass of lemonade. It was lukewarm by now, for the ice cubes had all melted and it had lost its tang. But he decided to sacrifice and not go in for a refresher, because in his hand was the latest John Grisham novel. He had played 9 holes of golf that morning, and so that he wouldn't be interrupted by his cell phone, he left it in the home. He hadn't turned on the TV, nor had he listened to the radio, so he had no idea that at that very moment, the first tower of the World Trade Center was crashing down. He was reading a paragraph when all of a sudden he heard a faint of a mosquito near him. And he swatted this way and that way, trying to get rid of it, and it seemed to be gone for a second or two, and then he heard it again. As the buzz of the mosquito, and it just disturbed him. He wound up reading the same paragraph 4 different times. He was getting mad. It was interrupting what he was trying to do. Finally, he looked up just in time to see it, and he put his hand together and splat. And he looked on the palm of his hand, and sure enough, there was blood. His own blood. That mosquito had gorged himself on his blood, and it made him mad. He flipped the page on the John Grisham novel and realized he had gotten blood on his brand new book, and it upset him terribly. He read the paragraph one more time. And then, believe it or not, he heard another, and he was starting to get angry. Then he remembered something he'd learned when he was a child. It may have been just a fable, but he had tried it before, and it seemed like it had worked, or at least he remembered it having worked. He held his breath. And when he held his breath, he believed that the mosquito would in fact go away. And sure enough, and it was gone. He let out his breath. But as soon as he did that, he heard it again. And he was so angry. He got so mad, he said words he should not have said, and he spoke to the mosquito and the book and to the world around him, and he said, "I am the most miserable man who has ever lived." The reporter followed Mother Teresa around all day long as she held those that no one else would hold, people who had sores and smelled and had things running from their body, who had only perhaps days or in some cases even hours to live. He in fact saw her hold a lady as she died in her arms. After hours of this, he became emotionally exhausted. He said to Mother Teresa, he said, "You know, I wouldn't do what you do for all the money in the world." And she said, "Neither would I." Lives lived by rules are wearying. Lives lived for comfort are boring. But lives filled with purpose are the most extraordinary lives in the whole world.